Alrighty, so I'm back. Gonna have a quick game or two. Do I need any reason? No. Simple. Just trying to kill time. Went out today, got the new tyre for the back of the bike.
Let's roll.
Now time to relax. One thing I could say, they'll never get sold riding that DR650. As I said, I wouldn't get on a bike until I stopped being a hoon. Well, I guess I've progressed to that level. Slowly. Surely. Although these days I can definitely say as you get older you fucking feel it. So, anyone listening, as soon as you hit the age of 30 you're gonna start feeling like shit.
Thanks. Bot Dave.
Man, you having a name for bot?
Bot Dave, I thought you were an actual bot.
Yeah, they're beginning, but now it's not.
Check for a badge beside the names.
Nerd.
No, it's just common sense. People who pay attention to detail actually get somewhere in life. Let's see what this guy is. Oh, clean shots, so I can't complain about them at the moment. Although, the one thing I'll point out is the fact that it's a new account, same as Hazard. So, already I'm starting to question things. So, didn't label this as a cheater, but maybe I should label this stream as a cheat catching stream.
Grab your gear, let's go.
Could be wrong, but just seems sus. Anyway, we'll find out in a minute, won't we? Fuck me. That's what amuses me. I know I got more than one shot into him, but on the replay it only shows him getting one shot against him. This game definitely has a few quirks, is the best way to put it.
Terrorists win.
Murder took a death on purpose. Let's see what we can do. Dumbass. Fuck off. That's getting bullshit already. Love how my character slows down whenever I get hit, but other people's characters don't.
Good fucking shit. I'm never.
It's amazing people have nothing original at all.
Terrorists win.
You're good. Try your Sukari.
I think I'm going to another room already. Fuck that one. Still, casual is a testing ground for a lot of script kiddies.
Let's roll.
Definitely look like it's a quiet day on Counter-Strike Go.
Good kill. Counter-terrorists win. Hostages coming out. Let's go.
Two down.
Grenade.
3 down. Doesn't really count when they're bots, but still. And they've already had someone swap teams because didn't want to die.
Move it, move it.
And it looks like he got thrown back.
Throwing flashbang.
One left.
Escorting the hostages. Counter-terrorists win.
Alrighty.
Go, go, go.
Don't want to do a rinse and repeat. It'd be too obvious on this map.
Throwing smoke.
That's why you never group. You just ask them to be shot by someone else.
Throwing a grenade. Flashbang. Counter-terrorists win. Flashbang. Deploying decoy. Grenade.
Close. But no cigar. Oh fuck did he go?
Terrorists win.
Oh.
Let's move out. Deploying flashbang. Decoy.
How the fuck did that bot get out so quick?
Counter-terrorists win.
Fucking knew it. Hey Bleeder, how you going, dude? Don't think I'll be on too long today. I'm just waiting for the other half to get home. Haven't you had a good day though, man?
Make it on site. Grenade out. Laying down smoke.
Damn it. So Pluto, did you check out Heroes and Generals yet?
Terrorists win.
Three-ish, two-ish, one-ish. Okay. Right side's been breached. Fucking hell.
Throwing flashbang. Throwing flashbang.
Heroes and Generals. It's a free game online. Find it through Steam. It's like Battlefield, but basically better. Infantry, tanks, planes, paratroopers. Probably the only game I've actually been addicted to for a long time. I'll do you one bet, I'll find the link for it. As you can see by the screen at the moment. It's definitely more of a realistic game.
Hostage has been rescued. Counter-terrorists win.
Wait, let me change. Good terrorist. I'm gonna use that as my sniper spot. Hey, cheeky, cheeky, cheeky. Kind of like when you hit a real bird in a car, they just explode into all the feathers. Yeah, I had the same deal with waiting the 24 hours. That's only for the live streaming though, so you can still upload your videos as well. I actually got the Tech 9 for once. But yeah, it's just a thing to make sure people don't rush to it and then change their mind shortly afterwards. At the end of the day, I've tried different streaming software, and I still fall back to OBS Live or Stream Elements, whichever you know it by the name of. One left, find him and hunt him. Just make sure he's not waiting here, because they normally do. Alrighty. He looks like he's passed out from a bad night.
Terrorists win. We will make them regret this day.
I've never played this map before.
Really, Faze?
Yeah, I've never played. This is like the one map I've never played.
Ah, it's not bad.
Eyes out.
It's cold.
Just like my heart.
Same Owen.
Throwing fire.
Oh shit.
Throwing fire.
Yeah, I started on Twitch, Pluto. You'll probably find my old account, Hypnobot, on there, but Twitch is way too sensitive with being politically correct. I was hearing about one main streamer girl. She had her account cancelled because she turned around and said there's only two genders, male and female, which isn't sexuality preference, by the way, because that's, you know, what a gay and lesbian comes under sexuality preference. Gender is literally your genitalia. But yeah, it's things like that. That Twitch is just so not worth the effort. Plus, also on Twitch, when I was playing Apex Legends on there, my streams got muted because of the theme song, because of EA went through and did a whole bunch of copyright.
Yeet.
Yeah. Twitch is just too twitchy for me. Alrighty, let's see if we can sniper someone without being snipered.
What the fuck was on the ground section? Holy shit.
What's that? Can't hear you because I got some Asians shoot me in the head.
This is a fucking underground section to this map. I never knew that.
Oh yeah, that leads from their spawn. Half the time people will be in there.
Wow.
What the fuck is wrong with this Asian? Must have killed him early and he's jealous.
My goodness.
Yeah, Pluto, have a look at the Twitch. Let me actually find a link / article quickly. Yeah, there you go. And there's been plenty of other people that get banned from Twitch as well. But it's something as stupid as that, you know, someone makes a statement which is technically correct, and peer pressure means that, you know, bang, your account's gone, any of your effort, work and all that's just wiped out. YouTube aren't like that. They'll at least give you warnings, 3 strikes, they'll take down the individual videos, a whole bunch of shit. So to me, Twitch just isn't worth the effort, not unless you want to play by, you know, the politically correct world, which is the minority.
We must work together. Throw in the flashbang. I'm throwing fire. Grenade.
Behind, in the tunnel. Oh, maybe that was a...
Oh,
there he is.
hostages has been taken.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's one of those rare few cases that was brought to the media, but at the end of the day, if I'm going to have my work, videos and all that cancelled just because I make a statement like there's 2 genders, to me that's not politically correct, as in the fact that they can do that. After all, what happened to freedom of speech? It only applies to the minority.
Hostage has been rescued. Counter-terrorists win.
But yeah, Heroes and Generals is definitely a game worth playing.
This is our fight.
The only reason I don't play it 100% at the moment is because it seems to glitch out my controls whenever I stream it. Again, what the? P90 is going to do it.
We're all in the underground area.
How strong was your password, Pluto? Sorry, I work in IT, been a website/web developer for years, so password security is something I do actually take damn serious, because the amount of times I've had staff members have stupid passwords. Don't get me wrong, I don't like a password I can't remember though.
Oh shit! Fuck, I'm scared.
Okay, so yeah, just, well, normally then it's social engineering, e.g. someone actually had access to your phone, your computer, that sort of crap. Not saying that's the
Sorry,
case,
boys.
but actual hacking is extremely rare. Password guessing, you know, 50-50. For example, it's easiest to do a password recovery, log into someone's email account, because most people keep them auto logged in or save passwords, delete the email and no one will ever know. One over in the barn.
Grenade out.
One in the hut on the left. Yep, I had a feeling it was going that way. Disappeared for too long. Flash in the front. Alright, we've got one underground. He's probably going for the hostage the long way. He's down. Well, yeah, if you've got your actually, you should be able to do a normal password recovery. Yeah, as long as it's still your email account, there's nothing to say you can't get it recovered. Unfortunately, it's a headache half the time. I hate hiding like this, but if it was real life, I guess that's what you'd apparently do. You can hear him in there and he doesn't know I'm out here. You can guess that I'm out here, but... God damn it! Hit him! There we go. Oh, no one.
I'm proud of you, Angry.
I wouldn't be.
Let us go.
We need to get Pluto on our team. Draw him out. One of the hostages has been taken. He'll be going underground. Meet him at the spawn.
Hostage has been rescued. Counter-terrorists win.
Oh, we got the revenge kill.
I will lead the way. Let's go.
Yeah, I do try my best to be silent in this game at times. E.g. Crouch, crawl, that sort of shit. Fuck, I gotta cover this spot.
Grenade out. I'm throwing a grenade.
Oh, lucky.
Flashbang. Hostage has been rescued. Counter-terrorists win.
You should be able to swap over Pluto. The teams look like there's enough room. Could be wrong.
Alright, boysies, we need to step up our game.
Don't count on me.
Hey, Angry, you know I'm counting on you, buddy. I'm counting on you extra.
So much pressure. It's like gravity's
No
doubled.
pressure. No pressure. It's,
Nah.
it's a casual.
It's pressure. It's always pressure.
Don't worry, you're good.
One down. Another one.
Oh, fuck me. No, Angry!
Pluto, if you're in Australia, I can definitely relate to the internet, considering we have one of the worst in the world. This guy was the one that was distracting me before because he got so pissed off that I killed him.
Fuck.
It's only 5-6. Hold at the hostages this time. Wait for him to come from.
It's a good plan. I like that plan. Let's do that. Let's go. Let's guard the hostages. Come on, let's camp. Let's camp.
Front door. One got taken out. It's 5 versus 5 still. Three of us left. Fuck. Damn, knew they were gonna go to the bottom one. Sorry guys.
It's okay, Angry Man. You did your best.
Go, go, go! Cover this area.
Nah, could always do better.
Yeah, that's what my mum said the day I was born.
My other favourite one is from a mechanic. He goes, "Ah, fucking, I wish my son had just had a wank instead. Would have made life so much easier."
Oh, very nice.
Flashback! Let's throw a grenade!
Bro, the fucking UMP is actually so great for its price range. Like, it's fucking light, it's accurate, and it does decent damage. Like, you can just fucking rush people so easily with it.
Sounds like my penis.
Sounds
Couldn't help
mine
it.
too. Mine's light, just without the rush.
Nice wipe out, guys. Done.
Yeet. Alright, we can pull it off, boys. We can pull it off.
Again, is that another penis reference?
Is it very nice?
I'm dropping in the tunnel. Let's see what happens. One there. Grenading it.
There's a second one in that doorway, buddy. You got us, Pluto. I'm on 9 health.
Yeah, I'm watching one at our base. You can see him on the map. Hostage has been taken. Someone watch the tunnel. Got him.
Yay! We got this, boysies.
Thanks for distracting me, FaZe. Oh. I hear him.
You follow me.
For fuck's sakes.
Good game, people. Minus the
Good
Asian guy,
GG.
that SWAT team's just distracting me.
GG, boysies.
I'm out for a bit, might be back in later, guys. Cheers for a good
Goodbye.
game as usual.
No problemo.